I was desperate. That kind of low where even dignity becomes negotiable. Rent was overdue. I had $23 to my name and no family to fall back on. So when I saw the ad pinned to the community board at a half-dead bus stop, I didn't question how strange it was. Night clerk needed. Special collections bookstore. Midnight to 6 a.m. $500 per night. Cash. Discretion required. No address, just a phone number. Something about it felt wrong, but hunger's louder than instinct. I called. A man with a quiet voice gave me directions and told me to come that evening. That was it. The store was on a street I swear didn't exist the last time I walked past it. Nestled between a shuttered bodega and a bricked-up laundromat, it appeared out of nowhere. No sign above the door, just a dusty display window filled with books that looked older than the town itself. I remember one in particular, a crimson-bound thing with no title and what looked like a lock welded across its cover. The kind of book that doesn't want to be opened. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else. The scent of old pages, sure, but also something metallic and sour. The bell over the door didn't ring when I entered. It clicked, like a clock. A man stood behind the counter, thin, pale, no older than 40, but with the tired posture of someone carrying something heavy inside. "You came," he said without smiling. "You'll do it." No interview, no form to fill, just a single manila envelope sealed with black wax. I opened it and found two things: a key with the number 1 etched into it and a sheet of paper. At the top, typed in blocky, faded font, were the words, "Night Protocol, do not deviate." Beneath that, 6 rules. Do not read aloud from any book after 12:33 a.m. If a book opens on its own, close it immediately. Do not read what you see. If you hear whispering between the shelves, do not follow it. At 3 a.m., the locked cabinet in the back may rattle. Do not approach it. If you find a book you don't remember shelving, burn it immediately. If the lights flicker 3 times in a row, leave the store, lock the door behind you, do not return. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. The man didn't. "You're here because you're hungry," he said. "You'll stop laughing around rule number 4. Before I could ask what that meant, he handed me a ring of keys, nodded toward the small stool behind the register, and left. No goodbye, no warning, just the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. Not ringing, clicking, again. I stood there in silence, staring at the shelves of leather-bound volumes and cloth-spined tomes, unsure whether to laugh or bolt. The clock behind the register ticked over to 12:01 a.m. The shop shifted. I don't know how else to explain it. The air thickened. The light dimmed by a degree I couldn't measure. And something, some presence, settled into the store with me. At first, I stayed behind the register. Didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the shelves and hoped I'd imagine that whisper of air brushing past my ear like breath. But around 12:20, a soft noise pulled me out of my trance. A creak, like the sound of a book opening. I leaned forward, listened, nothing, then again, creak. I grabbed the flashlight beneath the counter. It was heavier than it looked, the metal warm to the touch, almost like it had been used recently. I clicked it on and followed the sound. The back aisle, philosophy. The creak came again. My light swept across the shelves. That's when I saw it. A book, lying open, its pages curled at the corners like withered skin. The title on the top of the left page wasn't in English, or in any language I recognized. The script twisted like vines, moving subtly even as I stared at them. Not vibrating, breathing. I stepped closer. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe the book wanted me to. The letters shifted again, this time forming something I could read. One word etched in red across the page. Look. And I almost did. But then the rule came flooding back. If a book opens on its own, close it immediately. Do not read what you see. My hand shook as I reached forward and slammed the book shut. A cold wind whispered past my shoulder, and something deep in the store laughed. The book shuddered when I closed it. It wasn't an exaggeration. Its covers trembled like a dying insect pinned to a board, then went still. I backed away, heart punching against my ribs, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. Okay, I whispered to myself. Just a trick of the light. The draft, your imagination, all of it. I didn't believe a word. Rule number 2 had just saved me. And now, the rest of the rules, those absurd, terrifying rules, felt less like a prank and more like prophecy. Back at the front desk, I clutched the flashlight like a weapon and stared at the store's front door. Part of me wanted to run, just sprint into the night and never look back. But the key in my pocket felt like a brand. Like walking out now would somehow be breaking a deal I hadn't even realized I'd made. So I waited. The clock crept toward 1 a.m. The store remained quiet, save for the occasional creak of aging shelves and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. Every sound felt surgical, precise, placed, like someone or something was listening as much as I was. At 1:06 a.m., it happened again. This time, there was no creak, no whisper, just a thud. It came from the far right aisle, travel and geography. I waited a moment, heart pounding, but the sound didn't repeat. Still, the silence that followed was worse, heavier, like the bookstore itself was holding its breath. I moved slowly, flashlight sweeping wide arcs across the shelves. The deeper I went, the more the books seemed to lean in. Their titles were in languages I'd never heard of, their covers mottled like old skin. One shelf held nothing but books with no titles at all, just blank, pale bindings and locks across their spines. Then I found it. On a shelf labeled Historical Atlases, tucked between a massive atlas of 17th century trade routes and a book titled Maps of Forgotten Continents, sat a volume that hadn't been there the night before. I was sure of it. The cover was bone white, etched with deep black runes. Its spine didn't have a title. But on the front, written in a scrawled, jagged hand, were the words, "Do not file." I swallowed hard. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingertips grazing the edge of the cover. It was warm. Too warm. Like it had just been plucked from a body. Then rule number 5 slammed into my brain. If you find a book you don't remember shelving, burn it. Immediately. I pulled my hand back like I'd touched a stove. Burn it? I didn't even have matches. What kind of place was this? Back at the desk, I rummaged through the drawers until I found it. A silver tin labeled Emergency Disposal. Inside were strike-anywhere matches, a Zippo, and a tiny glass bottle of what smelled like accelerant. I hesitated. Burning a book, even this one, felt wrong, like desecration. But then I remembered the way that first book breathed, the way something had laughed behind me in the dark. I grabbed the white book with a dish rag from the cleaning supplies and carried it outside into the alley behind the store. The moment the book hit open air, the wind kicked up. Not a breeze, a gust, the kind that feels like it's whispering secrets in your ear. My fingers worked fast. I poured the accelerant, lit a match, and dropped it on the cover. The fire didn't burn normally. It hissed, spat, screamed. The flames danced in unnatural colors, blue, violet, green. The book writhed like it was trying to escape. Then, just as quickly as it began, it was ash. Gone. And the air went still again. I returned to the store, locking the alley door behind me, and for the first time that night, I understood. These weren't just books. They were things pretending to be books. Living things. Bound in covers, written in languages we were never meant to read. And somehow, this store was keeping them in check. Or containing them. I sat behind the desk, staring at the remaining rules. I hadn't even hit 3 a.m. yet, and I already felt like I'd stared into the abyss. What could possibly be worse than that? I got my answer 30 minutes later when the cabinet in the back began to rattle. It started soft, a faint clink of metal, barely audible over the hum of the overhead lights and my own anxious breathing. Then it rattled again, louder, deliberate, like something was locked inside and growing impatient. Rule number 4. At 3 a.m., the locked cabinet in the back may rattle. Do not approach it. I checked the time. 2:57 a.m. The cabinet knew. I stood behind the register, a flashlight aimed at the rear of the store where the cabinet sat half buried in shadow beneath the special collections sign that had always unnerved me. The air shifted around it. Subtle but noticeable, like static before a storm. That cabinet, antique, tall, carved with symbols that looked older than language, had been quiet when I arrived. Now it sounded alive. I counted the seconds. 2:58. The rattling became rhythmic. One shake, pause, another, as if it was breathing, as if it was listening. I turned off the flashlight. I don't know why. Maybe I thought hiding in darkness would make me invisible. Maybe it was instinct, like a child pulling the blanket over their head to make the monsters go away. But this thing didn't care. At 3 o'clock on the dot, the store fell into a silence so sharp it hurt. Then came the voice, faint, dry, as if being spoken through layers of paper, pages rustling in place of breath. It wasn't loud, but I felt it in my bones. Clerk. I froze. The cabinet didn't shake anymore. The air had gone utterly still. The voice returned. We remember you. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles cracked. My pulse pounded in my throat. Rule number 4 didn't say what was in the cabinet. Just don't approach, don't open it, don't engage. But now it was engaging me. We smelled you, the moment you entered. I backed up, slow and silent, inching toward the nearest aisle. I didn't want to be near the counter anymore. Not if the cabinet was going to keep whispering like it knew me. You burned our brother. That stopped me. The book, the one I torched out back. The cabinet rattled violently now, more than just a protest. It felt angry. Let us out. We will make this quick. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I'd officially reached the moment where my brain decided panic was too exhausting. Nope, I whispered to the darkness, voice shaky. That's a hard pass. And then, boom. The cabinet slammed against the wall. Once, twice. Dust fell from the rafters. I turned the flashlight back on just long enough to see something bulging from behind the locked wooden doors. Not a shape. A pressure, like the cabinet was swelling with whatever was inside, trying to burst. I killed the light again. You can't hide, not from the ones who remember. I crouched low, slid behind the biography section and covered my ears. But the voice found its way in any way, curling under my thoughts like ink in water. You've seen the script. You've smelled the ash. You opened the door when you took the key. You belong to the Shelves now. I wanted to scream, to run, but the rules, do not approach. I squeezed my eyes shut and repeated it over and over in my mind. Do not approach, do not engage, do not answer, do not look. Eventually, the voice faded, not like it left, more like it recoiled, retreated, not out of defeat, out of patience. The last thing it said, just as I dared to stand again, was a whisper so low it barely reached my ears. "We'll wait, clerk. We have time. You do not." And then it stopped. The rattling, the voice, the pressure, gone, but not the fear. That stayed. I returned to the counter, my legs like stilts made of rubber. The store was quiet again, but now the quiet felt sinister, like the absence of sound was just another way the bookstore watched me. The clock read 3:17 a.m. I still had hours to go. I stared at the rule sheet. 4 down, 2 to go. That's when I heard it again. Not the cabinet, not the whispering, but the soft, unmistakable flip of a page turning itself, followed by another sound, a second book opening on its own. This time, I didn't wait, because the lights flickered. Once, then again, then a third time. The third flicker hit like a gunshot. Then total darkness. No emergency lighting, no ambient glow from the street, not even the distant haze from the flickering neon sign I'd seen earlier outside. It was like the store had been swallowed whole, and with the darkness came the sound. A faint fluttering, pages, hundreds of them, flipping, turning, whispering. Rule number 6. If the lights flicker 3 times in a row, leave the store. Lock the door behind you. Do not return. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the key, the rule sheet, the flashlight, which was already dying, and shoved them into my pocket. I leapt over the counter and sprinted toward the front door. Every footstep echoed like I was sprinting across a cathedral floor. The air thickened with something musky, ancient, like the breath of forgotten libraries and locked crypts. My fingers closed around the doorknob. I twisted, locked. I turned the key. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open. I pulled harder. Nothing. No movement. No resistance. Just stillness. The door had become part of the wall. The store wasn't going to let me go. I backed away from the entrance, flashlight beam jittering. In the pulse of light, I caught glimpses of the shelves, not just standing still but leaning, pressing inward, closing the space. The store wasn't just a place anymore. It was alive, and it didn't want me to leave. A voice rose from the dark, but it wasn't from the cabinet. It was everywhere. "You stayed." I spun, hard in my throat. "You stayed." The voice repeated, now layered, like multiple versions of the same speaker. Some calm, some laughing, some crying. I aimed the dying flashlight toward the center of the store, and saw it. A book, floating, spinning slowly in the air above the center table. Its pages flipped on their own, the sound like 1,000 whispers. And surrounding it were the other books, shelved, unshelved, crawling from piles I hadn't even seen, gathering like insects drawn to light. They weren't watching me. They were watching the floating book. "You stayed, so we will show you." My knees nearly gave out as I stumbled behind the travel section, crouching low. I didn't want to see whatever was coming. My instincts screamed for me to close my eyes, but I didn't, because when the book snapped shut, the store breathed in, and the shelves shifted. One aisle parted cleanly, like a path carved by unseen hands, a corridor I knew hadn't existed before. At the end, a door stood open, blackness yawning beyond. It was labeled with a sign I hadn't seen in the store until now. The binding room. I didn't want to go down that aisle, but the rules are broken now. The lights had flickered. The door wouldn't open. The voice had addressed me by name. Everything was unraveling. I took one step forward, then another. The moment I entered the aisle, the whispering stopped. The air changed, warmer like the breath of a furnace. The books on the shelves were different here, not bound in leather or cloth. Some were covered in things that looked like hides, others in thick yellowed paper that pulsed faintly. A few had spines stitched together with twine or sinew. One book was weeping. I passed it and didn't look back. At the end of the aisle, the binding room loomed. Inside, the temperature dropped. The walls were lined not with shelves, but hooks. From each, a book hung suspended, their pages locked shut by clasps that shimmered faintly with something metallic and wet. There was a desk in the center, and on it, a ledger, old, massive, bound in black. It opened on its own as I approached. My hands were trembling. I stepped close enough to read the line at the top of the newest page. There were names, each one written in blood-red ink. Some had been scratched out. Some were still wet. And the last entry, it was mine. Clerk number 97, in violation. Underneath it, a note was being written in real time, the red ink seeping onto the page like a wound opening slowly. Transition begins. Shelving process approved. I staggered back. The room pulsed with heat, the whispering rising again. Not around me, but inside me. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were contracts, and I had broken mine. I ran. Out of the binding room, through the whispering aisle, back into the twisted maze the bookstore had become. The store groaned with each step I took, like it resented my movement, like it had decided I was furniture now, and furniture wasn't supposed to flee. The shelves had shifted again. Geography now bled into science fiction. Horror bled into reference. Sections didn't make sense anymore. Titles were duplicating. Books I'd seen once were now everywhere, their spines stacked crookedly like bones. My name was in the ledger. Shelving process approved. What the hell did that mean? Then it started. The sensation. At first it felt like a tingle in my fingertips. Then it crawled through my palms, up my arms. My skin prickled like pins were pushing out from the inside. I stumbled against a shelf and saw it clearly under the flashlight's final flicker. My fingers were splitting into parchment. The skin flaked off in thin, curling layers, ink bleeding through the creases in my palms. Words, sentences. I couldn't read them, but I could feel them, etched into me, trying to rewrite who I was. They were turning me into a book. I dropped the flashlight. It didn't matter. It sputtered once and died completely. The store welcomed the darkness. Books whispered louder now. My name, my memories. I heard them recited aloud like audiobook samples from hell. Jason Arthur Green, age 26, born under gray skies and absent fathers, took the job out of desperation, not faith. I screamed and covered my ears, but the words were coming from inside, from the ink etching into my flesh, from my lungs, my marrow, my chapters. I collapsed near the front desk, crawling blindly with paper-peeling hands. I slammed against the register and felt something hard in my pocket. The rule sheet, crumpled but intact. I yanked it free and held it like a relic, a final page of sanity in a place made of madness. 6 rules, all broken now, except one, Rule 5. If you find a book you don't remember shelving, burn it immediately. But I wasn't holding a book, was I? Or was it the book? My body shuddered with the realization. The store was following its own rules. I had become the unshelved volume, a corrupted entry, an anomaly that needed disposal, and the store wanted to do it its way, unless I beat it to the fire. I crawled to the back room, the one marked Staff Only, which I'd never dared to enter. It opened with a rusty creak, revealing a narrow hallway leading to what looked like a furnace room. Inside, the air was blistering. A small incinerator sat in the corner, old, industrial, marked with a label I couldn't make out because the letters were moving, not writhing, editing themselves. I reached the control panel and found a big red switch with a tag that read, "For unshelvable entries only." The whispers shrieked, a chorus of books, outraged. The binding room howled like a dying beast, and behind me I heard footsteps. Not one pair, many, dozens. The sound of boots, hooves, bare feet, and worse, spines slithering across stone. The store was sending its librarians. "You do not burn what belongs to the stack," the whisper screamed behind my ribs. I slammed the switch. The furnace roared to life. I grabbed the rule sheet, my last page, and held it to my chest as the flames ignited. Not just fire, blue light, black sparks, smoke that moved like thoughts. I stepped into the heat, unsure if I was killing myself or freeing myself. But the alternative was worse. Being trapped on some cursed shelf, a conscious book filled with agony and unfinished chapters. The paper in my arms crackled, the whispers roared, and just as the heat swallowed my vision, I saw it. A book, charred, fading, its cover, my name. I should have died in that furnace. By every rule of nature, of logic, of thermodynamics, there should have been nothing left of me but ash and half a scream. But that's not how stories end in this place. Not in the bookstore. Not when you've been written in. I woke up in the alley behind the shop, curled like a scorched manuscript. The night was quiet, no wind, no whispers. My skin was raw and pink, like something newly born, or half erased. The rule sheet was gone. My clothes were intact but covered in black soot. My pockets held nothing except for a single library-style checkout card. My name was at the top, stamped, returned. I didn't go back inside. I didn't even check if the building was still there. I ran. Through empty streets, past indifferent headlights, I ran until I saw dawn bloom over the rooftops like salvation. And even then, I didn't stop. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I kept checking the back of my hands, my forearms, waiting for the ink to return. Waiting for the whisper of parchment beneath my skin, for the letters to rise again like bruises spelling out my fate. But they never did. What I didn't expect, what truly scared me, was how much I remembered. Every word, every page, every rule, every scream. The store wasn't just a place, it was a thing, an organism, a library of lives, a cathedral of cursed knowledge, and I'd been inside it. Worse, I'd been almost added to it. The problem is, books, especially cursed ones, don't just go away when you close them. They linger. I started dreaming of pages again on the 4th night. At first, it was subtle. Shelves shifting behind my eyelids, a voice reciting sentences I'd never written. Then it grew louder, clearer. "You broke the rules, you burned the book, but you read the page, didn't you?" I'd wake up gasping, the taste of ash in my mouth, the distant, echoing click of the bookstore's front door swinging shut. And then came the packages. Small envelopes slid under my apartment door without explanation. Each one contained a single sheet of paper, each one covered in handwriting. Mine, confessions I'd never written, stories I'd never told, secrets I hadn't even known about myself until I read them, memories I didn't recognize. Then I realized they weren't from me. They were from the version of me the bookstore had started writing. The version it hadn't finished shelving. The version is still half alive in some haunted ledger. I was bleeding pages into the real world. And the worst part? I couldn't stop reading. Each envelope felt like a mirror, a glimpse into the story I'd almost become. Some ended with me clawing at locked doors. Some with my spine stitched into a binding. One ended with me whispering to another clerk, welcoming them to the night shift, welcoming them home. That's when I knew. The bookstore doesn't need you to return physically. If you've been inside, if it writes your name, you're a part of it now, somewhere between character and victim, entry and exit. And every time I sleep, it writes a little more. Sometimes I'll find a fresh rule posted on my fridge, scrawled in red marker I never bought. Sometimes I'll smell burning parchment in my kitchen, only to find the oven cold and empty. I haven't left town. Where would I go? The store is patient, it waits, it watches, and sometimes when I walk past a secondhand shop or an old thrift bookstore, I'll see a display window with a red-bound volume sitting alone under the light. No title, no author, just a label on the front in curling black ink. Staff log, incomplete. And when I look closely, the reflection in the glass isn't mine, it's the other me, the unfinished me, smiling, waiting, knowing that one day curiosity or desperation will pull someone else across that threshold. And when they break the rules, I'll be there, not to save them, not to warn them, but to watch them join the shelf, right next to me, right where their story belongs.